We are back yet again here on the Thick Men Inc. podcast, and this week we've got a lot to talk about, most of which revolve around the playoffs. Playoffs? Yes, playoffs. And the implications the Week 18 games had for that setup. But one thing which is not related to the playoffs is a very questionable move made by our friends down in Miami. After 2 winning seasons, Brian Flores was let go by the Miami Dolphins administration. And it seems to me there is a bit of a power struggle between the general manager and Mr. Flores, which resulted in, of course, Flores being unemployed at the moment. And I can't quite piece together why Flores lost his power struggle. It was evident that he was a very good coach from the Belichick tree, had great success, was winning games, won 8 of his last 9, could have made this team a playoff team if they had a mediocre offensive line or a functional quarterback, but he was being held back by the moves this front office made. Now, the Dolphins are in freefall. They're in limbo. They have nowhere to go. They are not going to improve next season. They're going to get much worse. They're still stuck with Tua turn the ball over at the moment, and unless they trade for Deshaun Watson or Mr. Unlimited himself, I don't think they're going to be able to compete for a winning season, let alone a playoff spot. But what do you make of this move, Tristan? What do you make of this move which befuddled the minds of Dolphins fans and football fans alike?
At the end of the day, it really doesn't make any sense that Flores wound up losing the power struggle. I mean, it is almost as dumb as the Giants keeping Joe Judge as their head coach.
Oh my God.
As an owner, what more do you want from a head coach? What more do you want him to do with a limited quarterback and a bad offensive line? It is impressive that the Dolphins finished this season after losing 7 games in a row. It speaks to the fact that players trust Brian Flores. They don't give up on him. It's not like watching the Giants kneel it out on 3rd and 9 playing uninspired high school football. If players
that quarterback sneak was the definition of inspired. That was an amazing play call and truly ingenious. I'm just sad it didn't work. Don't talk about uninspired with that, man.
If players didn't like Flores or didn't believe in their coaching staff, they would have had a top 5 pick this year. I think almost everyone can agree on that. It also begs the question, what more can the ownership want from a win standpoint? Brian Flores went 4-2 against the Patriots and was 24-5 as a head coach, above 500 the last 2 seasons. The decade prior to Flores' tenure with the Dolphins were 83-93 and were 5-15 against the Patriots. Flores had the team headed in the right direction. This also brings me to the second part of the discussion, the fact that Stephen Ross, the owner, chose GM Chris Grier over Flores. Chris Grier absolutely blew the first 3 draft picks they had in 2020. They had 3 first-round draft picks. He's the reason the Dolphins aren't currently Super Bowl contenders. Brian Flores did as good as he possibly could with the roster he was provided from the GM. Imagine if the Dolphins would have drafted Justin Fields, who Flores reportedly wanted in 2020. He saw what Herbert had to offer, and he was forced to use Tua, turn the ball over. He was forced to use Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Okay, let's be fair. Everyone was saying pick 2 with the 5th overall pick. It's not like the GM went out there and made some unorthodox move like drafting Daniel Jones at 6. Tua was the pick.
Well, he did what was safe for public perception. And if your head coach wanted a specific quarterback and that quarterback got drafted right after the quarterback you selected it's clear that there must have been other teams that valued Justin Herbert just as high as the Dolphins GM obviously valued Tua. So I don't see how the GM won this power struggle. And you can make the argument that all the draft picks they made this year, which have turned out to be good, Javon Holland, Jalen Phillips, you can argue that those 2 draft picks were probably heavily influenced by Flores, considering he controls the defensive side of the ball.
Waddle.
Well, and then maybe that's Chris Grier. So I feel bad for Dolphins fans. The Dolphins fans deserve better than this. They don't deserve to have to suffer whichever head coach comes next and the overwhelming mediocrity that is coming their way.
The Dolphins fans deserve nothing. They will get nothing, and I will not feel sorry for them. Any team which can roll out there with a color scheme as atrocious as Miami deserves nothing but 0-17 seasons for the foreseeable future, which is what they will be getting now that Brian Flores is gone. Not only did they nuke their coaching staff, they just nuked their locker room. They have to either completely retool that team or accept the fact they're going to win 3 or less games next season. Because I guarantee you the players are not happy with this pick. The Dolphins have completely abandoned the players, which is not something you want to do in the NFL when everybody is a millionaire.
another way people can think about this is, Isaiah, I know me and you have been a part of a very bad high school football team. There's a lot of people out there who've been a part of really bad high school, middle school, maybe even college football teams.
Yeah, I was a part of a very bad college football team too, but
I can't speak to your situation, but I know in our situation, when the team is really bad like it was, the coach loses a good portion of the locker room, especially if he has an unlikable or cold personality. And I think a lot of people have also experienced that on lower levels of football. So I think that it also speaks to how much Brian Flores had the Dolphins locker room, that he was able to recover a winning season after losing 7 in a row. I don't understand how he does that. And
then probably the also helped that everyone else got COVID or injured around that time, and their schedule got a lot worse. But hey,
it's still incredible.
It's impressive.
7 in a row, and then what was it, 8 in a row?
8 out of 9. Lost to the Titans last week.
Or 2 weeks ago.
Last week, 2 weeks ago. They won on Sunday. They lost the Sunday before that. Anyway, we're getting a bit bogged down in this topic. So we think the Dolphins are stooges. Their GM, mega stooge. Their fans, minor stooges. Their owner, stooge supreme. But on to a fan base, which Tristan and I have enjoyed poking
a despicable fan base.
A despicable fan base who lives rent-free in my co-host head. Pittsburgh Steelers have defied the odds and become a playoff team. Yes, playoffs. They snuck in with a victory over the depleted Ravens thanks to the strength of their defense and a little bit of luck from our friends in Jacksonville. We'll talk about our friends in Jacksonville later. But this is quite the retirement tour for Mr. Roethlisberger. Going out with a win at home, a win on the road to confirm a playoff spot, and now he is off to face the best the NFL has to offer in the Kansas City Chiefs. And you know, I believe in miracles. I believe in magic. And for all the despicable actions our fellow large man Ben Roethlisberger has conducted in his life, he has played some very meaningful football in the city of Pittsburgh, and the football gods will smile warmly upon this man. I would not be overly shocked if the Pittsburgh Steelers went on a long playoff run off the strength of their defense alone. It's reminiscent in a way to Peyton Manning's last year with the Denver Broncos, where he was completely dysfunctional, but they had Von Miller and therefore won the Super Bowl. Now, Ben certainly isn't as dysfunctional as Peyton was his final year, but he's not anything close to the legend he used to be. But this defense is pretty dang good. They've got the best defensive player in football, not named Aaron Donald at the moment, rushing off the edge and humiliating offensive tackles week in and week out. And if we learned anything from the Super Bowl, the Chiefs are vulnerable at the offensive line position. They can retool as much as they want. That position is still not at the top level of the NFL. And I think TJ Watt and the Steelers front seven can absolutely take advantage of that. Do I think they'll beat the Chiefs? In all honesty, no. But I think it's going to be a very competitive game for the first 2 or 3 quarters at least. Truly some quality football, and a little bit of magic there to end Big Ben's career.
I do not like the Steelers mainly because of the fan base and TJ Watt fanboys. It was just flat out sickening for me that they squeezed into the playoffs. And I believe that my analysis of the Steelers roster prior to the season was correct. As Isaiah just alluded to, there's a lot of pieces of it that were never really any good. There was one thing I was dead wrong about. It is that Mike Tomlin is an unreal coach, and I undervalued his ability to get the most out of his players. If it wasn't for Mike Tomlin and the Steelers had someone like Joe Judge, I'm going to keep referencing the Giants because it is painful. The Steelers...
If the Steelers had a bottom 5 coach,
Steelers would have the 4th overall pick. Their roster isn't there. Tomlin's ability to keep the Steelers competitive week in and week out with a tough schedule when people and other teams keep doubting them is extremely impressive. And sorry to bring up the Dolphins back up because we spent like 8 minutes on them, but this is also why the Dolphins should have placed more value on Flores' ability to keep the roster together despite disappointments. They should look to the Steelers and see how valuable it is to have someone. Now, Flores only did it 2 seasons, only had an above 500 record 2 seasons. What he was doing is somewhat comparable to what Tomlin has done for so many years. And when it comes to the actual game between the Steelers and the Ravens, I am not shocked the Steelers beat the Ravens. I did not watch the game in its entirety. I did watch overtime, and I do not need to list the Ravens' injuries again, but the Ravens are just so cooked at this point. And the fact that the Steelers needed overtime to beat them speaks to how badly they're going to get beaten by the Chiefs. They're going to get obliterated by the Chiefs. And, to the bettors out there, maybe you want to bet against the Chiefs because when I say something, the opposite tends to happen. And let me speak to the Ravens fans also very briefly. To any Ravens fans that are upset by the loss, they're upset by the missed opportunity to be in the playoffs, Lamar Jackson probably coming back. Don't dwell on this game. The Ravens had their opportunities to solidify their spot in the playoffs and failed 2-point conversions. Next year, the Ravens will be back in the AFC North. They'll have their players healthy. Lamar will be back. The Steelers, I think, are going to go through a mini rebuild. I'm not going to doubt them again from a record standpoint. They're probably still going to win 6-7 games, maybe get to 8 wins again with whatever QB they go after. So when it comes to this game in general, Steelers fans, don't dwell on it. You had your chances to make the playoffs. The Ravens blew them. Hopefully I said Ravens. I meant to say Ravens. And the Steelers, you're going to get blown out.
Well, we know Ben knows a lot about blowing stuff out. But I don't know if I necessarily agree with the comment about the roster not being built well. Obviously, the defense don't need to dwell on that. But they've got Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, Ray McLeod, for God's sake. They've got Najee Harris. Their offensive line is bad at run blocking, but middle of the pack in terms of pass blocking. So I feel like if they can get a decent quarterback, whether that be through the draft or through free agency, and Pittsburgh is a fairly desirable landing spot, big market, decent amount of talent around you, they could probably win as many, if not more, games next season. I would not exactly count on them winning 8. Like you said, Tomlin, very good coach, and if he won 8, technically he would have a losing record. As we know, Mike Tomlin will never have a losing record as an NFL head coach. It's just something which won't happen. But the Steelers, like it or don't, are a playoff team. And Tristan, he really does not like the fact the Steelers made it to the playoffs. He is not a fan of the 17 playoffs. And frankly, I don't understand the people complaining about the expanded playoffs. There are a lot of reasons why an additional playoff game is great for the NFL. The biggest being the Nickelodeon Slime Bowl. Never have I been more entertained and informed while watching a bad football game. I would watch a middle school flag football game if it was broadcast by Nickelodeon. They absolutely nailed the special effects and commentary. Young Sheldon delivered insightful information about penalties, and frankly, a lot of you TikTok commentators, you need to watch some Young Sheldon footage because he knows what he's talking about, unlike you. And of course, how could you forget Mitch Trubisky winning his first ever MVP award as a parting gift from the Bears? Truly a classic moment in NFL and social media history. I love that game. And it's going to be an even better game now the 49ers and Cowboys are squaring off. 2 real teams on the Nickelodeon network for football. That is amazing. On top of that, this is not the only reason why the 17 playoffs is great. You look at last year, the Bills and the Colts squared off. Very good playoff game. Bills were the 2 seed, Colts 7 seed. Colts took it deep into the 4th. Bills will go on to the AFC Championship game. You can get good competitive football in these games. And lastly, it is more football for free. Players are getting paid, and us viewers get to sit on our couch and be fat for all the more. So I love the idea of the expanded playoffs.
I've elaborated on why I don't like the 17 playoffs. I mean, you take a look at the 7 seeds this year. It's the Steelers and the Eagles. The Eagles have an absolutely pathetic resume of wins. The best win being the Saints, and that was when the Saints had Trevor Siemian. And the Saints are, I think, 4-6 with not Jameis Winston as their quarterback this season. So the Saints aren't a good football team. None of the Eagles' wins are good. And you take a look at the Steelers, and they have a better resume than the Eagles, but they've gone to overtime 3 times. They tied a winless Lions team. I know that Mason Rudolph was starting, but that is still bad. In general, it's been a very uninspiring offense, a very uninspiring season. So when you see who the 7 seeds are, I don't think there's a need to have them in the playoffs.
Just to wrap things up rapidly, there were some other games played which were very impactful. First off, the Chargers-Raiders game. The Chargers absolute stooges for calling that timeout. They should be embarrassed, ashamed, and humiliated by the actions of their head coach. It cost them a trip to the playoffs and gave the Pittsburgh Steelers a playoff berth. Thank you, Chargers coaches, for giving me yet another reason to humiliate and laugh at Tristan publicly. Next, we've got the Jaguars beating the dog shit out of the Indianapolis Colts. A humiliating game, mostly for the Colts offensive line, but really for Carson Wentz as well. What was it, a 4 QBR he put up? He should be embarrassed. Colts eliminated from the playoffs, team which was on fire 2 weeks ago. Now, see ya. They lost 2 must-win games. That's just bound to happen. They basically played in the playoffs twice the final 2 weeks of the regular season, lost both times. Can't do much with that. You gotta win those games. Colts didn't win those games. Now they've got to ask themselves, do we want to retool our system entirely, or are we going to ride it out again with Carson Wentz? Not Wentz, wins.
Well, those are the two games that sent the Steelers to the playoffs. And I think anyone who watched the Raiders-Chargers game, they can deduce that the Raiders deserve to beat the Chargers. They played better than the Chargers the entire game. Yes, there was the weird pass interference calls, but we don't even need to dwell on that. And they're just flat out better. The Chargers defense is just so bad. The run defense, more specifically, is embarrassingly bad. I can't imagine the Chargers defense having to play someone like the Titans in the playoffs that have a...
Well, they won't have to play the Colts in the playoffs.
that have a very good run game. And with that being said, Herbert is also an absolute freak, and it is incredible how much he raises his level of play when the pressure in the moment increases. He converted what seemed like 20 fourth downs. He reached another level every single time the Chargers had another fourth down. And when it comes to the whole tie situation, I am incredibly disappointed in the Chargers and Raiders. They could have improved the society we live in tenfold by tying the game. They could have mutually agreed at the beginning of the game to kneel the game out from the very first snap. They know there are zero fans that exist in the entire world that want to see the Steelers succeed besides the Steelers fan base. Yet they both tried to win the game the entire game. Truly despicable actions from both teams, and the Chargers should be just as heavily scrutinized for the outcome because they tried to win. They should have both just been trying to tie the entire game. Now we all have to suffer, the insufferable Steelers fans, and have to suffer through watching the Steelers. Now, let me give my final thoughts on the Colts and Jaguars.
Before we do that, you are seething and coping, as the TikTok comments say. You are seething and you are coping. But continue.
The Colts and Jaguars game. Isaiah already made a TikTok about this. I agree with many of his sentiments. The Colts offensive line was pathetic. But at the end of the day, Carson Wentz makes so many questionable decisions. He had a bad interception during that game. He had a couple throws where maybe his mechanics were off. He rushed the throw. He overthrew some passes. And the entire season, Carson Wentz did not elevate the Colts receivers around him. He did not elevate Michael. I think Michael Pittman is extremely talented. And I don't think he helped Michael Pittman reach to the next level. It was Jonathan Taylor who continuously elevated the Colts offense. So if the Colts want to get better, Wentz needs to take that step. I think they're going to have to stick with him next year just based on his contract. And I think it doesn't get much better in free agency or through the draft, especially with a rookie quarterback in year one next year.
I don't know, man. They've got the sure thing success that is Spencer Rattler coming up in the draft. He is the next great quarterback, or so I was told prior to the start of the season.
Oh, the Spencer Rattler downfall is quite
hilarious.
Is quite the thing to ponder. From number one overall pick,
we are haters. We laugh at people's downfall,
to hitting the transfer portal. Speaking of downfalls, then there's the Urban Meyer list, or maybe it's rises. The Urban Meyer list Jaguars. If you're a fan, you have to be happy with Trevor Lawrence's final performance of the season, and you just have to cross your fingers that becomes the norm heading forward, and that they get a better head coaching situation. The touchdown, more specifically, when Trevor Lawrence was evaded pressure, rolled out to the right, throws an absolute laser, just shows how talented he is and how good he can be if there's an offensive system built around him that is actually competent and isn't completely befuddling to watch like it was when we had to watch the Urban Meyer-led Jaguars. So I think it showed that Trevor Lawrence is still very talented and the Jaguars have a bright future if Shad Khan and management at the Jaguars can figure things out.
Well, Trevor Lawrence will undoubtedly be the best quarterback taken in this class. I don't care what type of accolades Mac wins. He's in a better system. Once Trevor Lawrence gets a functional offensive line for him, I think he's got the weapons to be very successful in the NFL between his 1,000-yard rusher, his first-round pedigree running back who isn't a 1,000-yard rusher, and, of course, the infamous man who told Urban Meyer he was a piece of shit to his face. Truly a respectable move by Mr. Jones. Future is bright in Duval. It was a great day to be a clown in Jacksonville.
Anyway, that has been the podcast. If you like the video, if you're watching on YouTube, give it a like, subscribe. Maybe we're getting close to 150. It's getting so high that I'm losing track of the subscriber count at this point. And if you're listening on Spotify, we can barely
count past 20.
Follow us on Spotify. If this podcast seemed all over the place, sorry. We had a couple technical difficulties that caused us to stop and start. And we will see you in the next one. Comment what you thought. I don't even know anymore. My thoughts are over the place. See you next time.
Seethe and cope. Seethe and cope.